It was a Friday morning in October 1965 at a Chase Manhattan branch in Queens, New York. A woman named Betty was getting ready for work. She was 23 years old. Her preparation was a strict ritual. She fastened the buttons of her crisp white blouse. She adjusted a pencil skirt that fell precisely below her knees. She smoothed out nylon stockings, making sure the thick seams ran perfectly straight down the back of her legs. She pinned a gold-plated plastic nameplate to her left chest. Finally, she applied a fresh coat of Revlon Fire and ice lipstick. A sharp click echoed as her cash drawer unlocked. The heavy scent of carbon paper and fresh ink settled on her hands. Through the glass doors, the Friday payday line was already forming. From his glass office, the branch manager was watching. Betty did not just count money. She was the living wall protecting the dignity of the bank. Her every movement was governed by a system she could not question. This is a countdown of the 12 rules she had to live under. Stay with me, because rule number 1 is the rule that quietly explained all the others. It is the unwritten law that turned any minor violation on this list into an instant dismissal. Number 12, the public face. Every working day began with strict physical engineering. Her hair was frozen into a rigid style with a heavy layer of aerosol hairspray. A single stray strand falling across her forehead was considered a violation of standards. Her vest and blouse could not show a single wrinkle under the bright fluorescent lights. Major banks issued strict orientation materials like the teller notebook to regulate every inch of her appearance. She was the human interface of institutional prosperity. The bank demanded that she look perfectly groomed and deeply reliable. She had to be attractive enough to welcome the public, yet entirely proper and non-sexual. Her appearance was no longer her own. It was corporate property. Number 11, the cage confinement. Once Betty stepped behind the chest-high glass counter, her physical freedom ended completely. The teller cage was a meticulously controlled environment designed for efficiency, not comfort. Her physical movements were restricted to a few square feet. Her tools were placed exactly where the branch manager dictated. The metal coin tray sat securely on the right. The heavy wooden handle of her rubber stamp rested perfectly parallel to her mechanical adding machine. There was no room for personal items. She was strictly forbidden from sitting down on a stool as long as a single customer stood in the lobby. Standing perfectly straight for 8 hours on a hard marble floor was simply part of her uniform. Number 10, the Friday line endurance. Payday was a brutal weekly test of physical and mental survival. By noon, the Grand Bank lobby would pack tightly with local workers. The enclosed air quickly grew heavy with the distinct smell of cigarette smoke, damp wool coats, and wet leather shoes. Betty had to process hundreds of handwritten checks and deposit slips without a moment of rest. She counted thick stacks of crisp bills with machine-like speed. Yet, despite the crushing pressure, she could never look rushed. She could never show frustration or fatigue. She could never let a single drop of sweat ruin her careful makeup. The crowd watched her every move, and she had to project absolute calm. Number 9, the pace of the machine. The banking world of the 60s was undergoing a silent revolution. Strange magnetic ink character recognition codes began appearing at the bottom of personal checks. Advanced systems like the Wells Fargo Dolly network started connecting tellers to central data through direct telephone lines. Betty did not just count paper money anymore. She was forced to synchronize her human biological rhythm to the rapid speed of early automation. She had to memorize complex routing numbers and new transaction codes. Typing one wrong digit into her terminal would break the entire chain of daily commerce. The invading machines were cold, perfectly precise, and totally unforgiving. The bank expected the women behind the counter to be exactly the same. The rules were not on paper. The rules did not need to be. We are halfway down the list. The rules so far focused on her physical appearance and her physical endurance behind the thick glass counter. The rules that follow are completely different. They invaded her mind. They dictated exactly how she was allowed to speak. Number 8. The scripted distance. A good teller had to memorize the faces and names of hundreds of local residents. Recognizing a wealthy business owner immediately was a basic expectation. However, Betty could never act too familiar with anyone. Her daily interactions were strictly guided by an invisible conversation chart. She had to listen to angry complaints about account fees with a pleasant expression. She was never allowed to argue back. When she spoke, her voice had to be perfectly modulated. She could not sound like a young woman from Queens. Her voice had to sound like the Chase Manhattan Bank itself was speaking. The bank was always polite, always distant, and always in control. Number 7. The endorsement scrutiny. Every time a customer slid a deposit slip or a paper check across the counter, Betty transformed into a silent judge. She had to verify the ink signature against the signature card kept on file. She had to check every detail with the sharp eye of a detective. Denying a transaction because the handwriting looked slightly wrong was a daily reality. Telling a proud man that his signature was unacceptable without making him furious was a high-risk psychological art. She had to project absolute authority while maintaining perfect submission. One momentary lapse in judgment could cost the bank thousands of dollars. The burden of that decision rested entirely on her shoulders. Number 6. The immediate confession. The daily flow of commerce guaranteed that human errors would happen. Handing out an extra $10 bill or typing the wrong account number was a common danger. Making a mistake was not the end of a career. Trying to hide a mistake was a fatal disaster. If Betty realized her drawer was short, she had to report it to the branch manager the exact moment it happened. The institution could easily absorb a minor financial loss. It could never tolerate a cover-up. The bank might forgive a moment of careless counting. It punished the slightest hint of dishonesty with an instant dismissal. Her integrity had to be absolutely spotless. Number 5. The banker hours illusion. The general public believed a teller had an incredibly easy schedule. They saw the heavy brass doors lock at exactly 3 in the afternoon. They assumed Betty simply packed up her purse and went home. The truth was entirely different. 3 o'clock was the moment the most terrifying part of her shift began. The busy noise of the lobby faded into a heavy, anxious silence. The long process of proof work started under the glaring fluorescent lights. Every single transaction, every paper check, and every coin had to be balanced perfectly. She could not leave the building until the final numbers on her adding machine tape matched the daily ledger. This exhausting reality was entirely hidden from the public eye. This unspoken rule was not in any printed handbook. It did not need to be. Number 4. The cash drawer absolute. The Federal Dictionary of Occupational Titles, published in 1965, outlined her basic duties. It stated she had to receive funds, pay out money, and keep a perfect ledger. It completely failed to mention the crushing psychological weight of the balance sheet. Her divided metal cash tray was the ultimate measure of her worth. She had to account for every single physical penny by the end of the shift. Being short 1 or 2 cents occasionally was an expected human error. Being short on a regular basis was a fatal career flaw. A repeating pattern of missing coins would immediately destroy the trust of the institution. She would be placed under a silent internal investigation. The branch manager would watch her hands from his glass office. Auditors would review her paper slips, looking for a pattern of theft. A teller who could not balance her drawer was a financial liability the bank would quietly remove. Number 3. The bondable mandate. A good teller quickly learned that her private life was never actually private. Early Federal Reserve reports required banks to carry comprehensive fidelity insurance. This policy was designed to protect the institution against dishonest employees. This created a ruthless, invisible standard for her personal behavior outside of working hours. Betty had to remain legally and morally bondable at all times. A secret gambling debt, a messy public divorce, or even a local rumor about wild behavior made her an unacceptable insurance risk. The bank judged her personal credit history just as harshly as it judged her customers. If neighborhood gossip or a background check raised any suspicions, the bonding company would refuse to cover her. An unbondable teller was instantly unemployable across the entire financial industry. She could not afford a single public mistake. Her flawless reputation was not just a point of pride, it was her capital. Number 2. The robbery protocol. The banking industry faced a terrifying surge in violent crime during this decade. This brutal reality forced the creation of the Bank Protection Act in 1968. The new federal security standards changed her job description completely. She was standing unprotected on the front line of an increasingly dangerous environment. When a desperate man slid a threatening handwritten note across the cold marble counter, Betty had a strict, cold-blooded procedure to follow. She was never allowed to resist. She was never allowed to act like a hero. Her specific instructions were to discreetly activate the silent alarm with her foot. She had to hand over the cash along with a concealed stack of marked bait money. Her most important job was to stare at the criminal and memorize his height, his eye color, and any visible scars. The institution valued her immediate compliance over the stolen cash. Her physical survival was carefully calculated into the daily operating costs. Number 1. The illusion of permanence. This was the ultimate unwritten law that explained everything else on the list. Betty was the flawless face of the institution. She guarded millions of dollars and maintained perfect daily order. Yet, the banking industry viewed her entire existence behind the glass counter as a temporary clerical interval. The corporate system never invested in her future because society fully expected her to marry a respectable man and immediately resign. Furthermore, a deeply cruel irony was hidden beneath her daily exhaustion. By meticulously balancing her ledger and following every rigid procedure, she was proving that complex financial transactions could be completely standardized. Her perfect human accuracy was silently laying the very groundwork for the machines that would soon take her place. In exactly 4 years, the first automated teller machine would be installed at a chemical bank branch in New York in 1969. The era of the human wall was already coming to a quiet end. But on this October afternoon in 1965, Betty did not know that. She simply turned the key to lock her metal cash drawer one last time. She walked out of the heavy brass doors into the fading autumn light. She felt deeply exhausted, yet quietly proud that she had survived another grueling week. If this story brought back a distant memory of the sharp sound of a rubber endorsement stamp hitting a thick savings passbook, the familiar feeling of smoothing out a handwritten deposit slip, or the heavy, anxious silence of a grand bank lobby after 3 in the afternoon, please hit the subscribe button to join us. There is much more true and completely forgotten history like this waiting for you. And the next story is ready whenever you want to listen.